So the payback rule has some problems. First of all, the time value of money is not considered. Nowhere did we discount anything. We simply added across time, and that's a big problem. Risk is not considered. There's no discount rate. There's no way to adjust for risk. And so we're sort of starting out on a bad foot. Third, the payback rule is really arbitrary. There's no theory behind it. And what I mean by that is if you think of NPV, the theory behind NPV is we want to maximize value. When the payback period rule, it says, okay, if this project pays back within 3 years, let's say, good. Well, where'd 3 come from? Is it 3 just some favorite number? Is it random? Is it based on anything? And so that's an issue as well. The payback rule is going to ignore all cash flows that occur after the payback period. And so depending on how big those cash flows are could have big implications for whether or not you accept or reject a good or bad project. The payback rule is biased against long-term projects. You can think of this as big R&D projects and any new projects that have really large initial costs, because with the R&D long-term projects, the big cash flows might not come for many years down the road, but they could be very big cash flows. And the initial cost could be, if you're looking at large initial outlays, that initial cost just might be too large to overcome quickly. Finally, the last problem is that the payback rule might reject good projects and accept bad projects based on the NPV rule. The benefits are that it's very simple. It's very simple. It's also relatively cheap to use. It doesn't take up much time to figure out how quickly something's going to pay back. It's easy to understand. You can walk into any room and if I, with no finance background, if I said, this is going to cost $1 million just to do, and we'll earn that $1 million back in 2 years, everyone knows what I'm talking about. One thing that is potentially good is that the payback is biased towards short-term projects, and these are very liquid projects, right? So you could think of it where, yeah, you might invest $1 million, but you're going to get that $1 million back pretty quickly. So you're you're maintaining a lot of liquidity. And in this case, when I say liquidity, I mean cash to make new investments. And the textbook sort of talks about an adjustment for uncertainty by ignoring later cash flows. If I asked you what is Apple's earnings going to be next year, I bet a lot of you could come pretty close. If I asked you what Apple's earnings are going to be in 20 years, it's going to be really difficult to predict that far out. But I don't view this as necessarily a great benefit because those long-term cash flows could be really important. And we're sort of, adjusting for uncertainty by ignoring is not necessarily a good thing because you are ignoring potentially very relevant information. So in summary, the payback rule could be very useful. I think we see it used mainly with smaller investments. There's a lot of those small investments that might cost less than $100,000, and you just sort of want to know, is this going to pay us back quickly or not? And of course, the payback rule has the same issue as the NPV in terms of the difficult piece is really estimating those future cash flows. However, we still see 57% of CFOs using the payback. We also see 30% using something called the discounted payback. And the discounted payback is basically the same idea as the payback, except before we calculate a payback period, what we do is we actually go ahead and we compute the present value of those cash flows. Then we compute the payback off of the discounted cash flows. So we're going to find a present value first, then we'll do our summations, our rolling summation to find the payback period based off of the discounted cash flows. And we'll go ahead and do a quick problem, expand on our example with that.